You've felt it, haven't you? That suffocating weight when someone's chaos becomes your emergency. When their drama drains your peace. When saying no feels impossible. Here's what nobody tells you about surviving in a world that constantly demands your emotional energy. The secret isn't building thicker skin. It's learning to step back without stepping away from yourself. But can you really protect your peace without losing your humanity? And what happens when the toxic people are the ones you love most? There's a skill that changes everything. And most people never discover it until they've already burned out. Chapter 1. Understanding detachment without losing your heart. Detachment sounds cold, doesn't it? When most people hear the word, they picture someone emotionally distant, uncaring, building walls so high that nothing gets in. But that's not detachment at all. That's isolation. And there's a universe of difference between the two. Real detachment is something far more powerful and far more necessary in today's world, where everyone's crisis is somehow supposed to become yours. Think about the last time someone dumped their problems on you. Maybe it was a friend spiraling over the same relationship issue for the 100th time. Maybe it was a family member creating drama and expecting you to fix it. You probably felt obligated to absorb their stress, to carry their burden, to somehow make it better. And when you couldn't, you felt guilty. That guilt is the hook that keeps you trapped. Here's what's really happening in those moments. You're confusing compassion with absorption. Compassion means you care about someone's pain. Absorption means you're taking that pain into your own body and mind, letting it poison your peace. And here's the twist most people miss. When you absorb someone else's toxicity, you don't actually help them. You just create two people suffering instead of one. It's like jumping into quicksand to save someone who's stuck. Now you're both sinking, and nobody's getting rescued. Detachment is learning to throw the rope instead of jumping in. It's learning to care without carrying. But society has sold us a lie. We've been taught that if we truly love someone, we should feel their pain as deeply as they do. We should lose sleep over their problems. We should sacrifice our peace for their chaos. And if we don't, we're selfish, cold, heartless. This programming runs deep, and it's destroying people from the inside out. The truth is far different. You can love someone deeply and still refuse to let their dysfunction dictate your emotional state. You can care about their well-being without making their problems your identity. You can offer support without offering yourself as a sacrifice. Detachment isn't about loving less. It's about loving smarter. Consider how a lifeguard operates. They're trained to save drowning people, but they're also trained never to let the drowning person pull them under. If someone's panicking and grabbing, the lifeguard creates distance, uses tools, maintains control. They save lives precisely because they don't lose themselves in the other person's panic. They stay detached from the chaos while remaining committed to the rescue. Your life needs the same principle. The people around you will panic, will create chaos, will grab at you desperately, and your instinct, if you're a caring person, will be to let them, to prove your love by drowning with them. But that instinct, no matter how well-intentioned, serves no one. Now here's where it gets challenging. Detachment requires you to trust something that feels counterintuitive. You have to trust that your peace matters as much as anyone else's problems. You have to trust that boundaries don't make you bad. You have to trust that someone else's emergency doesn't automatically become your responsibility. And for people who've spent years being everything to everyone, that trust feels like betrayal. It's not. It's survival. And more than that, It's the foundation of genuine help. Because when you're not drowning in other people's chaos, when you've maintained your center, when you've protected your peace, you actually have something valuable to offer. You have clarity. You have strength. You have perspective that someone in the middle of their storm simply cannot see. Detachment is the difference between reacting and responding. Reaction is emotional, immediate, chaotic. You feel someone's pain, and you instantly match their energy. Response is thoughtful, boundaried, intentional. You acknowledge their pain, but you don't adopt it as your own. And here's something most people never consider. When you react to someone's chaos, by becoming chaotic yourself, you're actually validating their dysfunction. You're confirming that yes, this situation is as catastrophic as they think. But when you respond with calm detachment, you offer them something they desperately need, but rarely receive. Evidence that this storm is survivable, that peace is possible even in difficult circumstances, that they don't have to be consumed by what's consuming them. This is how detachment becomes an act of love rather than an act of coldness. You become the steady ground beneath someone's feet instead of another person spinning in their tornado. But learning this skill, really learning it, requires unlearning almost everything you've been taught about care and connection. Chapter 2. Recognizing the many faces of toxicity. Toxicity has many faces, and most of them smile. That's what makes it so dangerous, and so hard to spot, until you're already tangled in it. We've been conditioned to think toxic people are obvious villains, cruel and aggressive. But the truth is far more subtle and far more common. Toxicity often comes wrapped in familiarity, in love, in need, in people who would be devastated to know they're draining you dry. Your mother who calls every day with a new catastrophe might be toxic. Your friend who only reaches out when they need something might be toxic. Your partner who makes you responsible for their happiness might be toxic. And here's the part that makes detachment so difficult. These people genuinely believe they're just being close to you. They think constant crisis sharing is intimacy. They think making you their emotional dumping ground is trust. They think erasing your boundaries is love. And because their intentions aren't malicious, you feel cruel for wanting distance. But intention doesn't cancel impact. Someone can hurt you badly without meaning to, and you still have the right to protect yourself. Recognizing toxicity requires honest assessment, and most people avoid that assessment because of what it might reveal. Ask yourself these questions. After spending time with this person, do you feel energized or exhausted? Do they celebrate your wins or subtly diminish them? Do they respect your no, or do they push until you cave? Do they take responsibility for their patterns? Or do they always have someone else to blame? The answers will tell you everything you need to know. But knowing and acting are different things. And this is where most people get stuck. They recognize the toxicity. They feel the drain. They understand something needs to change. But they don't know how to create distance without creating conflict. So they stay quietly suffering, slowly losing themselves. Here's what you need to understand about toxic dynamics. They're systems, and systems resist change. If you've been the person who always listens, always helps, always accommodates, the toxic person has built their emotional infrastructure around your availability. When you start detaching, when you start setting boundaries, the system feels threatened, and threatened systems fight back. This is why toxic people often escalate when you first start protecting yourself. They'll accuse you of changing, of not caring anymore, of being selfish. They'll manufacture crises that feel urgent. They'll use guilt, anger, helplessness, whatever tool has worked in the past. And if you're not prepared for this resistance, you'll fold. You'll think maybe you were wrong. Maybe you are being selfish. Maybe you should just go back to how things were. But going back means losing yourself. And that's not dramatic language. It's literal truth. Every time you sacrifice your peace for someone else's chaos, every time you ignore your needs to meet their endless wants, every time you stay silent when you should speak up, you lose a piece of yourself. And unlike money or time, you don't always get those pieces back. Toxic people are often master storytellers. They tell a story where they're the victim, and everyone else is either their savior or their villain. And they're very good at casting you in the savior role. It feels good at first, being needed, being important, being the one person who understands them. But savior is just another word for prisoner. When the person you're saving refuses to save themselves, you cannot detach from toxicity until you accept a hard truth. You are not responsible for other people's healing. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. You are not obligated to stay in situations that harm you just because leaving would hurt someone's feelings. Your first responsibility is to yourself, and that's not selfishness. That's basic survival. Chapter 3. The roots of your attachment patterns. Attachment wounds run deep, often deeper than we realize, until we try to detach from something unhealthy. Most of what we believe about relationships, boundaries, and obligation was programmed into us before we could even question it. Maybe you grew up in a home where love was conditional, where you had to earn affection through performance or caretaking. Maybe you learned that your feelings didn't matter as much as keeping the peace. Maybe you absorbed the message that saying no made you bad. These patterns become your operating system. And like any operating system, they run in the background, influencing every decision without you consciously realizing it. When someone asks too much and you can't say no, that's not weakness. That's programming. When you feel responsible for other people's emotions, that's not compassion. That's conditioning. And until you understand where these responses come from, you'll keep repeating them, no matter how much damage they cause. Childhood teaches us our first lessons about attachment. If you had caregivers who were emotionally inconsistent, you probably learned to monitor other people's moods constantly, trying to predict and manage their emotions to keep yourself safe. That hypervigilance doesn't just disappear when you become an adult. It transforms into people-pleasing, into over-functioning, into taking responsibility for things that were never yours to carry. Here's what happens in your nervous system during these patterns. When you sense someone's distress, even if it has nothing to do with you, your body registers threat. Your stress hormones spike. Your survival brain kicks in and asks what you need to do to make this person okay so you can be safe. And before you consciously decide anything, you're already moving toward them, already absorbing their emotion, already trying to fix it. This is why detachment feels so uncomfortable at first. You're fighting against neural pathways that have been carved deep through years of repetition. Your body literally interprets someone else's upset as danger to you, and detachment as abandoning your survival strategy. Of course it feels wrong. Of course it triggers anxiety. Your system thinks you're putting yourself at risk. But here's the reality your nervous system hasn't learned yet. You're not a child anymore. You're not dependent on these people for survival. Their emotions cannot actually hurt you unless you give them that power. And staying attached to their chaos doesn't keep you safe. It just keeps you sick. Breaking these patterns requires more than intellectual understanding. You can know logically that you're not responsible for someone else's feelings and still feel crushing guilt when they're upset. You can understand that boundaries are healthy and still feel panic when you try to set one. Knowing better doesn't automatically translate to doing better, because we're not just fighting thoughts. We're fighting the wiring of our entire system. This is where practice becomes essential. Detachment is a skill, and like any skill, it develops through repetition. The first time you don't answer that manipulative text immediately, it'll feel awful. Your anxiety will spike. You'll imagine worst-case scenarios. You'll want to give in just to stop the discomfort. But if you can sit with that discomfort, if you can let it be there without reacting to it, something shifts. You start to learn that the discomfort doesn't destroy you, that the other person's upset doesn't actually threaten your safety, that choosing yourself doesn't make you a monster. And slowly, repetition by repetition, you build new neural pathways. You teach your system that detachment is safe, that boundaries protect you, that your peace is worth defending. But be realistic about this process. If you've spent 30 years being enmeshed with other people's emotions, you're not going to master detachment in 30 days. There will be setbacks. There will be moments when you fall back into old patterns. There will be times when the guilt feels too heavy and you cave. That's not failure. That's being human while learning something difficult. The question isn't whether you'll struggle. The question is whether you'll keep going despite the struggle. Chapter 4. Protecting your energy like currency. Energy is currency in the modern world, and most people are bankrupt without realizing it. They wake up exhausted, drag through their days, collapse into bed, and repeat. They blame their jobs, their schedules, their responsibilities. But often the real drain isn't what they're doing. It's who they're doing it with and for. Toxic relationships are silent energy thieves, and detachment is how you stop the robbery. Every interaction costs energy. Positive interactions can actually give you energy back. You spend time with someone who uplifts you, who reciprocates care, who respects your boundaries, and you leave feeling better than when you arrived. But toxic interactions only take. They drain your reserves and give nothing back except stress, resentment, and exhaustion. Think about your weekly energy budget like money. You have a certain amount to spend. Some expenses are necessary. Work takes energy. Parenting takes energy. Basic life maintenance takes energy. But then there are the wasteful expenses. The friend who calls to complain for 2 hours, but never asks how you are. The relative who creates drama you have to manage. The colleague who dumps their work on you because you can't say no. These aren't necessary expenses. They're leaks in your system, and they're costing you far more than you realize. The energy you waste on other people's self-created problems is energy you can't use for your own growth, your own peace, your own life. And here's the brutal math that most people avoid. If you have limited energy, and you give most of it to people who drain you, there's nothing left for the people who deserve it. There's nothing left for your goals. There's nothing left for yourself. You end up living an entire life in service of other people's chaos, while your own dreams gather dust. And when you finally realize what you've lost, the resentment is crushing. Detachment is energy conservation. It's deciding that your limited resources won't be poured into bottomless pits. It's choosing to invest your energy where it actually yields returns. It's understanding that every yes to someone else's unnecessary drama is a no to something that matters to you. But here's where the guilt comes in. When you start protecting your energy, people notice. The ones who've been freely taking from you suddenly find your well isn't bottomless anymore. And they don't like it. They'll accuse you of being different, of not caring, of abandoning them in their time of need. And if you're not solid in your why, their accusations will work. You need to get clear about something fundamental. Caring about someone doesn't mean you're required to be their emotional landfill. You can love someone and still refuse to let them dump their toxicity on you repeatedly. You can want good things for someone and still decline to sacrifice your peace for their chaos. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors that you control. Some people will respect your new boundaries. They'll adjust. They'll take responsibility for their own emotions. They'll meet you in healthier ways. These are your people. These relationships can grow and deepen because there's mutual respect and reciprocity. But some people won't respect your boundaries. They'll push harder. They'll test constantly. They'll try every manipulation in their toolkit to get you back in line. These people are showing you exactly who they are. They're revealing that their relationship with you was never about mutual care. It was about what they could extract from you. And as painful as that revelation is, it's also liberating. Because now you know. Now you can make informed decisions about how much access these people get to your energy, your time, your life. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop caring more about them than they care about themselves. It means you stop working harder on their problems than they do. It means you stop setting yourself on fire to provide them with light. And yes, that might mean some relationships end or drastically change. That's not a failure. That's a filtering process. Chapter 5. Emotions are information, not orders. Emotions are information, not commands. This might be the most important thing you learn about detachment. When you feel guilty for setting a boundary, that guilt is information. It's telling you something about your conditioning, your beliefs, your patterns. But it's not a command. You don't have to obey it. You don't have to let it dictate your choices. You can acknowledge the guilt and still do what you know is right. Most people treat their emotions like unquestionable authorities. They feel anxious, so they avoid. They feel guilty, so they cave. They feel obligated, so they comply. But emotions, especially in people with trauma or unhealthy conditioning, are often terrible guides. They're based on old programming that doesn't serve your current reality. They're reactions from a wounded part of you that learned dysfunctional lessons about safety and love. When you start practicing detachment, your emotions will protest loudly. You'll feel selfish when you prioritize yourself. You'll feel cruel when you don't fix someone's problem. You'll feel terrified that you're damaging the relationship. And if you treat those feelings as facts, as accurate reflections of reality, you'll stop detaching. You'll go back to the familiar pain of enmeshment, because at least that pain doesn't come with guilt. But here's what you need to understand. Those feelings are echoes from your past, not predictions of your future. They're the voice of the part of you that learned love meant self-sacrifice. They're the alarm system that was calibrated in dysfunction and never updated. They're not telling you the truth. They're telling you what your wounded self believes is true, which is very different. Learning to observe your emotions instead of obeying them is a game changer. When guilt arises because you said no, instead of immediately trying to get rid of the guilt, by changing your no to yes, you can pause. You can notice the guilt. You can get curious about it. Where does this feeling come from? What old story is it connected to? Is this guilt based on actual wrongdoing, or is it based on violating a dysfunctional rule I learned? Most of the time, when you investigate, you'll find the guilt isn't proportional to the situation. You set a reasonable boundary, and you feel guilt as intense as if you'd committed a crime. That disproportion is the clue. It tells you this response isn't about the present moment. It's about the past bleeding into now. The same is true for anxiety, for fear, for obligation. These feelings arise from old wounds, from conditioning, from nervous system patterns that were adaptive once, but are destructive now. And while you can't just think them away, you can stop treating them as gospel. You can create space between the feeling and your response to it. This is where the power of detachment really shows up. You're not detaching from your emotions. That's suppression, and it doesn't work. You're detaching from the belief that your emotions are always right, always helpful, always to be immediately acted upon. You're learning to let feelings exist without letting them run your life. Imagine your emotions as weather. Sometimes it rains. That's information. It tells you conditions are wet. But you don't cancel your entire life because of rain. You note the weather, you adjust accordingly, you bring an umbrella, and you keep going. Emotional detachment works the same way. You feel the guilt, you note it, you understand where it's coming from, and then you do what's right anyway. This takes practice because we're taught the opposite. We're taught that if something feels bad, it is bad. We're taught to chase good feelings and avoid uncomfortable ones. We're taught that feeling guilty means you did something wrong. But maturity is learning that sometimes the right choice feels terrible because you're going against years of programming. And you do it anyway because you know what's on the other side. What's on the other side of temporary guilt? Freedom. What's on the other side of temporary anxiety? Peace. What's on the other side of feeling selfish for prioritizing yourself? A life that's actually yours. But you only get there by walking through the discomfort, not around it. People who master detachment don't stop feeling. They feel deeply. But they've learned to create space between stimulus and response, between emotion and action. They've learned that just because someone's upset doesn't mean they have to fix it. Just because they feel guilty doesn't mean they did something wrong. Just because something feels urgent doesn't mean it requires their immediate sacrifice. Chapter 6. Boundaries that actually hold their ground. Boundaries are not negotiable if you want a healthy life, yet most people treat them like suggestions they can ignore when the pressure gets high enough. They set a boundary. Someone pushes against it, guilt floods in, and the boundary dissolves. Then they wonder why nothing changes, why people keep taking advantage, why they feel perpetually exhausted. The answer is simple but hard to accept. Boundaries without enforcement are just wishes. Think about what a boundary actually is. It's not a rule you impose on someone else. You can't control other people's behavior. A boundary is a line you draw about what you will and won't accept in your own life. It's a decision about what you'll do when someone crosses that line. And this is where most people get it wrong. They say something like, "I need you to stop calling me," with drama every single day, thinking that's a boundary. But that's actually a request. A request asks someone else to change their behavior. A boundary states what you'll do regardless of whether they change. The boundary version sounds like when you call with drama. "I'm going to end the conversation. I'm available to talk about other things, but I won't be your emotional dumping ground anymore." Notice the difference. The request puts all the power in the other person's hands. They get to decide whether to honor it. The boundary puts the power in your hands. You're stating what you'll do to protect yourself, regardless of their choice. And this distinction is everything. Toxic people hate boundaries because boundaries remove their access to you. They can't guilt you if you don't engage with guilt trips. They can't manipulate you if you don't participate in manipulation. They can't drain you if you're not available to be drained. Boundaries are the locks on your doors, and people who benefited from those doors being wide open will absolutely try to pick those locks. This is why you need to expect boundary testing. When you first set a boundary with someone who's used to having unlimited access, they will test it. They'll push harder. They'll try different tactics. They'll escalate to see if they can crack your resolve. And if you fold during this testing phase, you've actually made things worse. You've taught them that boundaries don't mean anything, that if they just push hard enough, you'll cave. Enforcement is what makes boundaries real. If you say you won't engage with drama, and then you engage anyway, you haven't set a boundary. You've just announced your weakness. But if you say you won't engage, and then you actually follow through, if you end the call when drama starts, if you don't respond to manipulative texts, if you stick to your line, no matter what guilt trip comes your way, something powerful happens. People learn you mean what you say. Not immediately, not without testing, but eventually. And here's what's interesting. Some people will respect your boundaries once they realize you're serious. They'll adjust how they interact with you because they value the relationship more than they value their ability to use you. These relationships can actually get healthier and stronger. But some people won't adjust. They'll get angry. They'll accuse you of being cold or different, or not the person they thought you were. They'll try harder manipulation. And when none of it works, when your boundaries stay solid, they'll often just leave. They'll drift away or explicitly end the relationship. And this is the moment that separates people who master detachment from people who stay stuck. When someone leaves because you set boundaries, they're telling you they were never interested in a real relationship. They were interested in a dynamic where they had all the power and you had all the responsibility. They valued what they could take from you, not who you actually are. And as much as that hurts, it's crucial information. It's showing you that keeping them in your life was costing you yourself. Healthy people respect boundaries. They might not love them. They might need adjustment time. But ultimately they respect that you have the right to protect yourself. Unhealthy people see boundaries as attacks. They see your self-protection as abandonment. And you cannot have a healthy relationship with someone who requires your self-abandonment as the price of admission. Here's the practice. Start small with boundaries. Don't try to revolutionize every relationship overnight. Pick one area, one person, one pattern that's really draining you. Set a clear boundary. Decide in advance what you'll do when it's tested, because it will be tested. And then follow through, no matter how uncomfortable it feels. That discomfort is important. It's where change happens. Every time you enforce a boundary despite feeling guilty, you're rewiring your brain. You're teaching yourself that your needs matter, that protecting yourself isn't cruel, that you can survive someone's disappointment. And slowly, enforcement by enforcement, boundary by boundary, you build a life where your energy goes to what matters instead of being scattered among everyone who learned they could take it. Chapter 7. Detaching from the people you love most. The hardest detachment is always from the people closest to you. Strangers are easy. You can walk away from toxic coworkers, distant relatives, casual friends. But what about your mother, your sibling, your best friend from childhood, your partner? These are the relationships woven into your identity, your history, your sense of who you are. And when these relationships are toxic, the pain of staying and the pain of detaching both feel unbearable. This is where most advice fails people. It's easy to say just cut off toxic people when you're talking about acquaintances. It's exponentially harder when you're talking about the person who raised you, who knows everything about you, who you've built your life around. The guilt isn't just about the present moment. It's about betraying years of history, of shared experience, of love that exists alongside the toxicity. But here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. Love doesn't make toxicity okay. History doesn't mean you're required to keep suffering. The fact that someone is family doesn't mean they get unlimited access to harm you. And sometimes the people who should protect you the most are the ones causing the most damage. Sometimes the relationship that's killing you is with someone you desperately wish you could keep. Detachment from close relationships rarely means dramatic cutoffs, though sometimes it does. More often it means radical acceptance of who someone is and adjusting your expectations accordingly. It means accepting that your mother will probably always be critical and deciding not to seek her approval anymore. It means accepting that your sibling will probably always create drama and deciding not to get pulled in. It means accepting that your friend will probably always be self-centered and deciding to limit how much you invest. This kind of acceptance feels like giving up on the relationship, and in a way, it is. You're giving up on the fantasy version, the version where they suddenly become who you need them to be. You're giving up on fixing them, changing them, earning their better treatment. You're giving up on the hope that if you just love them enough, sacrifice enough, understand enough, they'll finally meet you with the care you deserve. That grief is real and it matters. You're mourning the relationship you wanted, the parent or sibling or partner you deserved but never got. And that loss needs to be felt and processed. But staying stuck in that mourning, refusing to accept reality because reality hurts too much, only extends your suffering. At some point, accepting what is becomes less painful than continuing to fight for what will never be. Detachment in close relationships often looks like lowering your emotional investment to match what's actually safe to invest. If someone has proven they'll use your vulnerabilities against you, you stop sharing those vulnerabilities. If someone has proven they won't show up for you, you stop expecting them to. If someone has proven that your pain doesn't matter to them, you stop making their opinion of you matter so much. This doesn't mean you stop loving them. It means you stop letting that love destroy you. You love them from a distance that protects your peace. You care about them without making their chaos your responsibility. You maintain connection without sacrificing your sanity. And yes, this often means the relationship becomes more surface level, less intimate, less central to your life. That's the cost. But consider the alternative cost. Staying deeply enmeshed with someone toxic means constant pain, constant stress, constant sacrifice of your own well-being. It means teaching your nervous system that love equals suffering. It means modeling dysfunction if you have children. It means spending your precious life energy on someone who won't or can't reciprocate. Those costs are catastrophic, even though they accumulate slowly. Some people will say you should try harder, give more chances, be more understanding. And if the person is actively working on themselves, if they're taking responsibility, if they're genuinely changing, then yes, patience and support make sense. But if they're repeating the same patterns, if they're refusing to acknowledge the harm, if they're demanding you tolerate their toxicity because of your shared history, then trying harder just means you suffer longer. You have permission to protect yourself, even from people you love. You have permission to create distance, even when it hurts. You have permission to prioritize your peace, even when others call it selfish. Because here's what they're not telling you: when they push you to maintain toxic relationships, they won't be there to hold you when the constant stress makes you sick. They won't live with the anxiety, the depression, the lost years. You will. Chapter 8. Building worth that cannot be shaken. Self-worth is the foundation of detachment, and most people are building on sand. They know intellectually that they matter, that their needs are valid, that they deserve respect, but they don't believe it at the core level, where beliefs actually drive behavior. And until you genuinely believe you're worth protecting, every boundary will feel like too much. Every moment of prioritizing yourself will feel like selfishness. Every act of detachment will feel like cruelty. This is why affirmations alone don't work. You can repeat "I am worthy" 1,000 times, but if your actions constantly communicate the opposite, if you keep accepting treatment you know is harmful, if you keep sacrificing yourself for people who wouldn't do the same for you, your nervous system knows the truth. And the truth is you don't actually believe you matter as much as everyone else. Building genuine self-worth in a world that conditions you towards self-abandonment is revolutionary work. It starts with honest assessment of how you treat yourself compared to how you treat others. Would you accept a friend treating you the way you treat yourself? Would you tell someone you care about to tolerate the things you tolerate? Would you advise them to keep pouring energy into people who only take? The answers usually reveal a painful double standard. You extend grace, understanding, and accommodation to everyone else, while holding yourself to impossible standards and accepting scraps. You fight for other people's boundaries while demolishing your own. You recognize when someone else is being mistreated, but you normalize your own mistreatment. This isn't humility. It's self-betrayal. Real self-worth means treating yourself like someone you're responsible for caring for, because you are. You're the only person who will be with you for your entire life. You're the only person who truly knows what you need and what hurts you. You're the only person who can protect your peace, your energy, your future. And if you won't do it, nobody else will. This doesn't mean becoming selfish or uncaring. It means putting your oxygen mask on first, so you actually have something to give others. It means recognizing that you can't pour from an empty cup. It means understanding that self-care isn't indulgent. It's foundational. Without it, everything else collapses. But here's where the work gets uncomfortable. Building self-worth requires you to make choices that feel wrong at first. It requires you to disappoint people who expect your unlimited availability. It requires you to say no when yes would be easier. It requires you to choose yourself, even when others think you're being selfish. And every single one of those moments will trigger the old programming that says you're only valuable when you're useful to others. You have to be willing to sit in that discomfort. You have to be willing to let people think you've changed, because you have. You have to be willing to lose relationships that only worked because you had no boundaries. And you have to trust that what you're building, a life based on genuine worth, rather than desperate proving, is worth the temporary pain of transition. One practice that changes everything is treating your own requests of yourself with the same seriousness you treat others' requests of you. When you promise yourself you'll rest, you'll set a boundary, you'll protect your peace. Do you keep that promise with the same commitment you'd keep a promise to someone else? Or do you constantly break promises to yourself the moment someone else needs something? Every broken promise to yourself is evidence that you don't take your own needs seriously. Every time you override your own, knowing to please someone else, you're confirming that your voice matters less than theirs. And your subconscious is always watching, always learning what you truly believe about your worth, based on what you do, not what you say. Start keeping promises to yourself. Start small. If you say you're going to take a break, take the break, even if someone texts needing something. If you say you're not going to engage with drama, don't engage even if you feel guilty. If you say you're going to protect your energy, protect it even when protecting it disappoints someone. Each kept promise builds evidence that you matter, that your word to yourself is valuable, that you're worth the effort. Over time, something shifts. The guilt lessens. The boundaries get easier. The detachment feels less like abandonment and more like self-respect. You start to genuinely believe what you've been trying to convince yourself of, that your peace is valuable, that your energy matters, that you deserve relationships that don't require your constant self-sacrifice. And from that foundation, everything changes. Chapter 9. Detachment in action when moments matter. Practical detachment is where philosophy meets daily life. And this is where most people struggle. They understand detachment conceptually. They agree it's necessary. But when the phone rings with someone's crisis, when the guilt trip lands, when the old patterns pull, they don't know what to actually do differently. So they fall back into familiar dysfunction, because at least they know how to navigate that, even if it's killing them. Let's get specific about what detachment looks like in real moments. Your mother calls in crisis mode about something that isn't actually a crisis, but feels urgent to her. Old pattern is you drop everything, you absorb her anxiety. You spend an hour calming her down while your own stress skyrockets. Detached response is you answer. You listen briefly. You say something like, "That sounds stressful, and I trust you'll figure it out." And you end the call before her anxiety becomes yours. Notice what's happening there. You're not being cruel. You're not refusing to care. You're refusing to take responsibility for managing her emotional state. You're treating her like a capable adult who can handle her own feelings, instead of like a child who needs you to fix everything. And yes, she might not like it. She might escalate, might guilt trip, might accuse you of not caring. That's the test. Your friend texts about the same relationship problem they've been complaining about for months. They're not asking for advice. They've rejected every suggestion you've made. They just want to vent, which really means they want to use you as an emotional dumping ground. Old pattern is you engage fully. You offer support. You invest energy in their drama. Detached response is you send something brief like, "That's tough. Hope it works out," and you don't get pulled into the spiral. This feels harsh at first, especially if you're used to being everyone's therapist. But here's what you need to understand. When someone repeatedly creates the same problem and refuses to change anything, they're not looking for solutions. They're looking for enablers. And every time you provide endless sympathy without requiring them to take any responsibility, you're helping them stay stuck. Real compassion sometimes means refusing to participate in their dysfunction. Your colleague tries to dump their work on you again. They use the same tactics that have worked before. They're overwhelmed. They frame it like you're the only one who can help. They appeal to your desire to be helpful and competent. Old pattern is you take on the extra work, even though you're already stretched thin. Detached response is, "I can't take that on right now," said without justification or apology. The key phrase there is without justification or apology. Because here's what happens when you over-explain. "I can't take that on right now, because I have this thing, and this other thing, and I'm really behind, and I wish I could," but invites negotiation. It signals that if your reasons aren't good enough, you might cave. A simple, "I can't take that on right now," is complete. It doesn't require their approval. It doesn't ask permission. It states reality. Boundaries work best when they're simple and consistent. You don't need different boundaries for different people. You need clear internal standards about what you will and won't accept. And then you apply those standards, regardless of who's testing them. This consistency is what builds your own trust in yourself. You learn that you'll actually protect yourself, that your boundaries aren't just for show. Another practical tool is the pause. When someone makes a request, when drama arises, when pressure builds, practice pausing before responding. Old pattern is immediate reaction. They need something. You immediately figure out how to provide it. They're upset. You immediately try to fix it. They create urgency. You immediately comply. The pause breaks that automatic response. Even a few seconds changes everything. In that pause, you can ask yourself questions. Is this my responsibility? Is this actually urgent? What do I want to do versus what do I feel obligated to do? Will helping this person help them, or just enable more dysfunction? That pause creates space for choice instead of compulsion. Detachment also means getting comfortable with other people's discomfort. This might be the hardest part. You set a boundary and someone gets upset. Old pattern is you immediately backtrack to make them feel better. Detached response is you let them be upset. Their discomfort is information about their expectations, not evidence that you did something wrong. People will often try to make their feelings your problem to solve. They'll be disappointed, hurt, angry, and they'll communicate those feelings in ways designed to make you fix it by giving up your boundary. "I'm so hurt that you won't help me" is meant to generate guilt that makes you help. Detached response is, "I understand you're disappointed, and I'm still not available for that." You acknowledge without absorbing, validate without sacrificing. Chapter 10. The freedom waiting on the other side. The transformation that comes from mastering detachment isn't instant, but it's total. People who learn this skill describe it as finally being able to breathe after years of suffocation. They talk about having energy for their own lives, instead of spending it all on other people's chaos. They describe peace they didn't think was possible while still maintaining relationships. And they all say the same thing. They wish they'd learned this years ago. But here's what nobody tells you about the other side of detachment. It's lonely at first. When you stop being everyone's emotional support, when you stop participating in drama, when you stop over-functioning in relationships, people treat you differently. Some get closer because they respect the healthier version of you. But some drift away because they only valued what they could take. And watching people leave when you finally choose yourself is painful, even when you know it's necessary. You'll also discover who you are outside of caretaking mode, and that can be disorienting. If you've spent years defining yourself by how helpful you are, by how much you do for others, by your ability to fix and manage and accommodate. Who are you when you stop doing those things? Many people realize they don't actually know themselves very well because they've been too busy managing everyone else. This identity work is crucial. You're not just learning to detach from toxic people. You're learning to attach to yourself, to your own values, to your own path. You're learning to build a life that actually reflects who you are rather than who everyone else needs you to be. And that requires figuring out what you actually want, what actually matters to you, what you'd choose if you weren't choosing based on obligation. For some people, this leads to major life changes. They realize their entire career was about pleasing a parent. They recognize their relationship only works because they've had no boundaries. They see that their friend group is built on dysfunction, and they're the designated fixer. And once you see these things clearly, you can't unsee them. You have to decide whether you're going to keep living a life that isn't yours, or whether you're going to build something different. Other people find that detachment allows existing relationships to become healthier. When they stop over-functioning, partners and friends step up. When they stop absorbing everyone's emotions, people learn to manage their own. When they stop being available for drama, the drama often decreases. Removing yourself as the solution sometimes forces others to find actual solutions. But you have to be willing to let the chips fall where they may. You can't detach strategically, doing it just enough to manipulate people into treating you better, but not enough to risk losing them. Real detachment means you let go of control. You protect yourself, and you let others do what they're going to do. Some will rise to meet you in healthier ways. Some won't. And you have to be okay either way. The peace that comes from this is unlike anything else. It's not the peace of having no problems. It's the peace of knowing that other people's problems aren't your emergency. It's the peace of going to bed without carrying the weight of everyone else's chaos. It's the peace of having energy for your own life, your own growth, your own joy. It's the peace of knowing you can handle whatever comes because you're not also handling everyone else's whatever. You'll notice physical changes too. The chronic tension in your shoulders might ease. You might sleep better. Your anxiety might decrease. This makes sense because you've been living in chronic stress, constantly managing threats to your peace. When you stop doing that, when you protect your boundaries, your nervous system finally gets to relax. Your body recognizes you're actually keeping yourself safe now. People will notice you've changed, and their reactions will tell you everything you need to know. Healthy people will generally appreciate the change, even if they need time to adjust. They'll respect your boundaries. They'll meet you in the new dynamic. They'll value the relationship enough to work with your needs, instead of just demanding you meet theirs. These relationships deepen because they're finally based on mutual respect rather than one-sided sacrifice. Unhealthy people will hate the change. They'll try to guilt you back into old patterns. They'll tell you you're not the person they thought you were. And they're right. You're not. You're someone who finally values yourself enough to stop accepting mistreatment. And if they can't relate to that version of you, if they can't accept a relationship where they don't get to take everything while giving nothing, then they were never your people anyway. The path forward isn't about perfect detachment. You'll still care too much sometimes. You'll still get pulled into drama occasionally. You'll still feel guilty when you prioritize yourself. But the trajectory matters more than perfection. Are you generally moving toward healthier patterns? Are you catching yourself faster when you slip into old habits? Are you enforcing boundaries more consistently? That's progress, and progress compounds. Detachment in a toxic world isn't just a skill. It's a radical act of self-preservation and self-love. It's choosing yourself when you've been taught that choosing yourself is selfish. It's protecting your peace when everyone wants a piece of it. It's building a life that's actually yours, instead of a life built around managing everyone else's chaos. And while the journey is challenging, what waits on the other side? Freedom, peace, energy, authentic relationships. Genuine happiness is worth every uncomfortable step